Arielle Prescott yanked her suitcase off the baggage carousel just as the man beside her reached for the same black Samsonite. "Sorry, this one's mine," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear and flashing an apologetic smile. The man looked down at the luggage tag, then back at her. "Arielle P." He read aloud, his tone smooth and amused. "Looks like you're right." She gave a small laugh, cheeks flushed. "Been traveling for 12 hours. I'd fight someone for this suitcase at this point." He chuckled, his voice deep and effortless. "Well, I'd surrender." "I don't mess with determined women at baggage claim." She glanced at him. Tall, well-dressed in a gray coat and black button-down shirt, no tie. Clean-shaven, jawline sharp, eyes-piercing blue. Handsome in a way that made her immediately regret the hoodie and leggings she'd worn for the flight. He extended a hand. "Pax Varen. Arielle Prescott." She shook his hand briefly. His grip was warm, steady. "You visiting New York or heading home?" "Heading home, unfortunately," she said, adjusting the strap on her shoulder bag. "Job interview didn't exactly go as planned in San Francisco." "Sorry to hear that." She shrugged. "Welcome to the life of a broke graphic designer." His brow lifted slightly. "You don't seem broke." "Yeah," she said, gesturing to her scuffed sneakers. "Tell that to my shoes." He laughed again, then paused, looking at her suitcase. "Need help getting that outside?" "I got it. But thanks." She started to walk away, then hesitated. Something about him lingered, his calm confidence, maybe? Or the way he looked at her, like he actually saw her. She didn't expect to see him again. But 3 days later, she did. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday. Arielle was sitting at the corner table of her favorite coffee shop in Brooklyn, sketching out logo concepts on her tablet, earbuds in, latte untouched. "Excuse me," a familiar voice said. "Do you always steal suitcases, or was that a one-time thing?" She looked up, startled. Pax stood there in a navy coat, holding a to-go cup, looking like he belonged in a magazine ad. She blinked. "Are you following me?" "Maybe," he said, pulling out the chair across from her. "Or maybe I just like this place. Best coffee in the city." She laughed, shaking her head. "What are you doing in Brooklyn?" He leaned back in his chair. "I live not too far from here. Had a meeting nearby." "You don't look like a Brooklyn guy." "What do I look like?" She tilted her head. "Manhattan. Upper West Side. Maybe Tribeca." "Close." "Tribeca," he said, grinning. "But I grew up in Queens." She raised an impressed eyebrow. "Let me guess. You work in finance." He hesitated, then said, "Something like that." "Cryptic. I like it." He glanced at her tablet. "You're talented." She looked down at her designs. "Still jobless?" "Not for long, I'm guessing." They talked for an hour. About art. About cities. About how New York was too loud but also, sometimes, perfect. He listened without interrupting, asked questions that made her feel interesting, like her words mattered. "Do you want to get dinner sometime?" he asked as she packed up her things. She hesitated. "You don't even really know me. I met you at baggage claim. That's practically fate." She smiled. "All right, dinner." He stood and held the door open for her as they left. Friday. That Friday, Pax picked her up in a sleek black town car. She nearly fell over when she saw where he took her, an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park, the kind of place she'd only seen on Instagram. "I thought we were just getting sushi or something," she whispered as they were led to a private table. "I figured you deserved a better meal after that flight." The table had candles, a view of the skyline, and a menu with no prices. She stared at the wine list like it was written in Greek. "You okay?" he asked, pouring her a glass of red wine. I can't afford even the bread here." He leaned in, eyes kind. "You're not paying for anything. Relax." She stared at him. "What do you actually do, Pax?" He looked at her for a moment, quiet. "I run a tech company." "Oh, like a startup?" "No, like a company that build a lot of the back end for most of the shopping apps you use." Her eyes widened. "Wait, what's the name of your company?" "Varentech." She blinked. "You're the CEO of Varentech?" He nodded, almost sheepish. She choked on her wine. "You're Pax Varen." "Oh my God." You were in Forbes. He gave a small smile. I was hoping you wouldn't recognize me. She laughed, half shocked. You're a billionaire. Technically, yes. She leaned back, stunned. And you're sitting here having dinner with a girl who argued with you over a suitcase. I like that girl, he said simply. She looked at him, really looked at him, and the way he said it made her chest tighten. After dinner, he walked her to a waiting car. I'll have the driver take you home. You don't have to do that. I want to. She hesitated, then stepped in. As the car pulled away, she looked back and saw him still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her go. The next day, a delivery arrived at her apartment. A box wrapped in dark ribbon. Inside was a brand new sketch tablet, the one she'd dreamed of for months, and a note, for the designer who deserves the world. Pax. She stared at it for a long time, then picked up her phone. She didn't text him. She called. Arielle's heart pounded as the phone rang once, then twice. Hello? Hi, she said, her voice a little breathless. I was hoping you'd call. I got your gift, she said. You really didn't have to do that. I know, Pax replied. But I wanted to. Did you try it yet? I haven't even taken the plastic off. I'm still in shock. There was a pause, then his tone softened. Would you let me see what you can do with it? I'd love to watch you create. She hesitated. You want to see me work? Absolutely, he said. I'm hosting a cocktail reception at my penthouse tomorrow. Industry people, friends, a few investors. Nothing too formal. But there's a glass studio upstairs and I thought, if you're free, you could come early. Sketch a little. Let me see how your brain works. You have a studio in your penthouse? You'll see. She swallowed. Okay. I'll come. The next evening, Arielle stood in front of the mirrored elevator doors in a vintage black jumpsuit she'd borrowed from her cousin. Her nerves buzzed as the elevator glided upward, floor after floor, until it opened into a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. Wow, she whispered, stepping into the penthouse. Pax stood near the window, dressed in slate slacks and a deep blue shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. You made it, he said, walking toward her. I almost turned around twice on the way here. I'm glad you didn't. He led her up a floating staircase to a mezzanine-level studio, enclosed in glass with a slanted skylight. A long drafting table stood by the window, a tablet and stylus already waiting. Arielle set down her bag and took a breath. Can I watch? He asked. I guess. It's probably not that interesting. He pulled up a low chair and sat quietly as she powered on the tablet. For the next hour, she worked while he watched in silence. The only sounds were the hum of the city beyond the windows and the scratch of stylus against glass. Every time she glanced up, he was still watching her, not with impatience, but with a kind of quiet fascination. At one point, he leaned forward. How do you decide what to draw? She paused. I don't. I just start. It's like letting my hands think for me. That's incredible. She looked at him. You don't think it's weird? I think it's rare. They locked eyes for a moment too long before a voice interrupted from downstairs. Pax? Guests are arriving. He stood. Stay as long as you like. Or come down if you want. I'll be down in a bit. When she finally descended the stairs, the penthouse had transformed. Soft lighting bathed the space in gold. Waiters in crisp white served hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. A string quartet played near the window. Pax was speaking to a small group near the fireplace. As soon as he saw her, he excused himself and crossed the room. You look different, she said, eyeing the tailored suit he must have changed into. Corporate disguise. He offered her a glass of champagne. She raised an eyebrow. Is this going to cost more than my rent? Definitely. She took it anyway, sipping as she glanced around. So, these are your people. Some of them. Investors. A few founders. People I mostly tolerate. She laughed. That's reassuring. Come meet someone, he said, placing a hand gently on the small of her back. He introduced her to a woman in a crimson pantsuit named Elise, who owned a branding agency. Arielle kept her answers concise, her eyes flicking to Pax every few seconds. After making rounds, they ended up on the balcony where the hum of the city stretched out beneath them. You okay? He asked, watching her lean against the glass railing. I think I'm in over my head. You're not. She looked at him. You barely know me. I know enough. She turned toward him. Why me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low. Because you're not impressed by any of this. Because you talk about your art like it's the air you breathe. Because when I met you, you didn't flinch when I told you who I was. You just looked annoyed about dinner prices. She smiled, despite herself. You noticed that? I notice everything about you. She turned away, heart pounding. I'm not used to people seeing me like that. Then they're not really seeing you. They stood in silence for a moment before he said, Come with me tomorrow. To where? I'm flying to the coast for a day meeting. Malibu. Back by evening. There's a gallery opening after. I'd like you there. She studied him. You're serious? Completely. I have a job interview at noon. Then I'll have the jet wait. She laughed in disbelief. You're ridiculous. Maybe. But I mean it. She looked out at the skyline. I'll think about it. He stepped closer. I hope you say yes. Later, as she walked toward the elevator, Elise caught her eye from across the room and made her way over. You're the designer Pax keeps talking about, she said, offering a knowing smile. He talks about me? Only when he's not busy watching you like a man who's already made up his mind. Arielle felt her throat tighten. Don't be scared, Elise added gently. He's not like the others. When he chooses hard. The elevator doors opened. Arielle stepped inside, her mind spinning. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no either. Arielle stood on the tarmac, the wind catching her coat as the sleek silver jet gleamed under the morning sun. A uniformed attendant offered a hand up the stairs, but it was Pax waiting at the top who caught her gaze. You came, he said, stepping aside so she could enter. I figured if I'm going to make reckless decisions, I might as well do it in style. He grinned as the door sealed behind them and the hum of the engines began to rise. Inside, the jet was more like a luxury apartment than a plane. Cream leather seats, dark walnut accents, fresh orchids on the table. A tray of fresh pastries sat untouched beside 2 flutes of pale orange juice. I thought you'd like something light, he said, taking a seat across from her. So you just fly to Malibu for meetings like it's nothing? Sometimes. Depends on the meeting. She buckled in as the jet began to taxi. And the gallery? A friend's show. He's a sculptor. I thought you'd like his work. You know, most people try to impress someone with dinner and a movie. I'm not most people. She narrowed her eyes. You know, that line usually comes with a warning label. He leaned forward slightly. Do you want a warning? I think I already got one. They fell into silence as the jet lifted, clouds blurring past the windows. Hours later, Malibu unfolded beneath them, sunlit cliffs, winding roads, glass-front mansions nestled in the hills. The car waiting for them was low and silver, the kind of vehicle Arielle had only seen in magazines. Pax opened the door for her without a word. The meeting took place in a private residence overlooking the coast. While Pax disappeared into a conference room, Arielle wandered the terrace, her eyes tracing the horizon. She wasn't sure which stunned her more, the ocean or the way none of this seemed to faze him. When he returned an hour later, he found her sketching by the pool. That's the view from the upstairs balcony, he said, glancing at her drawing. You memorized it? I've been here enough times. She looked up. So this is what success looks like. No, he said, sitting beside her. This is what access looks like. Success is something else. Like building an empire from scratch? Like building it without losing yourself in the process. She studied his profile. Have you? He didn't answer. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair. Come on. The gallery's next. The space was tucked into a narrow street in Venice, a converted warehouse filled with towering iron sculptures and suspended glass. The artist, a lean man with silver-streaked hair, greeted Pax like an old friend. This is Arielle, Pax said. The artist's eyes lit up. You're the one he wouldn't shut up about last week. Arielle raised an eyebrow. That's so. I exaggerate, the man said, winking. But not much. She wandered the exhibit while Pax spoke with collectors. Every sculpture was raw and angular, almost violent in form. But there was beauty too in the tension, in the way light moved through the glass. You like it. Pax asked when he joined her. It's like the pieces are trying to hold themselves together, like they might collapse if you look away. Exactly. She turned to him. You see the world like this? More than I should. They left before sundown, driving back along the coast with the windows down. He didn't put on music. Instead, they drove in quiet, the sea breeze threading through her hair. Do you ever just stop? She asked. What do you mean? Stop building, expanding, running. Do you ever just exist? I try. Doesn't always work. Sounds exhausting. It is. They stopped at a cliffside restaurant with no sign, just a gravel path and a view that made her catch her breath. Their table was half sheltered under olive branches, the ocean stretching endlessly below. As they ate, she traced the condensation on her glass. I'm not used to this. To what? Being seen as someone worth the effort. He put down his fork. That's not about what others see. That's about what you believe. She held his gaze. And what do you believe? That you're smarter than anyone in this room. That you're terrified of failing. That you've been underestimated for most of your life. So now you do it to yourself. She didn't answer because he wasn't wrong. I also believe you're not afraid to call out someone who's used to people saying yes. She gave a short laugh. That sounds like a compliment and a warning. Maybe it is. As the sun dipped lower, he reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers with a kind of reverence. I don't want to scare you off. Too late. He laughed, but it faded quickly. But I mean it, Arielle. This. You. I didn't expect any of it. She looked down at their hands. Neither did I. The flight home was quiet. She curled into the leather seat, watching the clouds drift past the window. Pax sat beside her, one hand resting on the divider between them, not quite touching hers. When the jet landed, the city lights wrapped around them like a second sky. He walked her to the car waiting at the hangar. Before she stepped in, she turned to him. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. But I'll see you tomorrow? Try and stop me. She got in and the car pulled away, her heart thudding in her chest. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in years she wanted to find out. The day of the gallery's private auction arrived with a sharp wind slicing through Manhattan, tugging at Arielle's coat as she stepped out of the car Pax had sent. She hadn't seen him in person for 3 days. Not because he hadn't asked he had, but because she needed space to think. The past week had moved with the velocity of a dream. She'd gone from jobless and drifting to sketching in penthouses and flying over oceans. She needed to find her footing again. Tonight's event was different. Formal. High profile. Pax had told her she didn't need to come. Hadn't pressured her. But he'd mentioned the gallery would be auctioning off a piece by a reclusive sculptor she admired. And something in his voice, quiet, almost hesitant, nudged her toward yes. She walked into the gallery alone. The space was transformed. Spotlights illuminated towering installations and the air buzzed with polite laughter and clinking glasses. Arielle's heels tapped softly on the polished floor as she scanned the room and spotted him, Pax, standing in a tailored obsidian suit, head slightly bowed as he listened to a woman in a structured gown speak animatedly. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes flicked toward the entrance the moment she stepped inside. He excused himself without missing a beat and crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. You came, he said, voice low. I wanted to see the piece, she replied, holding his gaze. And I wanted to see you. Something in his expression eased. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either. He offered his arm and she took it, letting him guide her through the crowd. I heard Elise offered you a client last week, he said as they passed a wall of framed sketches. She did, Arielle nodded. I took it. It's a small branding project, but it's something. She said you didn't hesitate. I didn't want to feel like I needed anyone to open doors for me. He glanced at her. I never wanted you to. They stopped in front of the piece she'd come to see, a sweeping iron structure, splintered at the edges like something once whole now caught mid-collapse. She stared at it in silence for a long moment, You told me once that success isn't about access, she said finally. But you have a lot of it. Doesn't it ever feel hollow? Every day, he replied. Until you. She turned slowly toward him. I don't need you to be impressed, he said. I need you to be real. And you've been the only person who's ever made me feel like I could stop pretending. The bidding began moments later. People began to gather. Pax led her to a quieter corner, offering a better view of the auction floor. The sculptor's piece was last. I want to buy it, he said. Arielle's brows lifted. Why? Because you love it. And I want something that reminds me of you. She shook her head. Pax, that's not how you remind yourself of someone. Not with things. Then how? He asked genuinely. By being there. By showing up. Not with gifts or gestures or jets. But when it matters. He looked at her a beat passing. I didn't grow up with any of this, you know, she said. There were nights we didn't have heat. My mom worked 2 jobs and still came home smiling. I learned early that love doesn't come in boxes. Comes in quiet. In presence. The auctioneer called the starting bid. Pax didn't raise his hand. Arielle watched him, waiting. You're not bidding? She asked. No, he said. I'd rather earn your time than buy your attention. She didn't speak, but something unspoken passed between them. Respect. Relief. Maybe even a little awe. The piece sold to someone 3 rows down. After the auction, Pax walked her toward the exit. I need to ask you something, he said as they stepped into the crisp night. Okay. Do you want to keep going? With what? This. Us. I know it's fast. I know it's a lot. But I also know I've never wanted someone like I want you. Not because you're beautiful, though you are. Not because you challenge me, though you do. But because with you I'm not just a title or balance sheet. I'm a man who finally wants more than the next deal. She looked up at him, wind brushing her hair across her cheeks. I do want more. But not if I have to become someone else to fit into your world. You don't, he said instantly. I want to build something that feels like both of ours. She stepped closer. Then start by asking me. He blinked. Ask you what? Ask me to stay. His hand found hers, fingers threading together. Stay with me. She smiled. Okay. He kissed her then there on the sidewalk outside the gallery, city lights shimmering in her periphery, the world moving around them like background noise. A week later, Arielle stood in her new studio space leased under her name, entirely hers. Pax had helped her find it, but the lease, the work, the vision, it was all her own. He walked in carrying 2 coffees and a folder. What's that? She asked. He set the drinks down and handed her the folder. Your first full branding contract. Real budget. Real timeline. From a company I don't own. She opened it, eyes scanning the details. When she looked up, he was watching her. Something reverent in his gaze. I'm proud of you, he said. She took a breath. I'm proud of me too. Later that night, he brought her to the rooftop of his building, where strings of lights had been draped across the railing and a small table was set for 2. You did this? She asked. I wanted our first dinner in this new everything to be quiet. They ate, laughed, stole kisses between bites. And when dessert came, it wasn't cake or champagne or anything extravagant. It was a single envelope. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside was a boarding pass. One way. To Florence. She looked up. I want to take you somewhere where you can breathe, he said. Where you can draw in the morning and eat in the afternoon and forget the weight of everything. I'd love that, she whispered. He reached across the table, taking her hand. No matter where we go, I'll always come back to where this started. She tilted her head. Baggage claim? He grinned. You stole my suitcase. I stole your attention. You stole everything. She laughed and then without hesitation leaned across the table and kissed him. Not because of the jet. Not because of the gesture. But because he saw her. And she saw him too. Snow fell in soft spirals over Florence, dusting the cobblestones and catching in Arielle's hair as she stood on the balcony of their rented villa, sketchpad balanced on one arm. The city was quieter in winter, the tourists fewer, the streets more intimate. Behind her, light from the fireplace flickered inside the villa's warm stone walls. Pax stepped out, wrapping an arm around her waist from behind. "You've been out here for almost an hour." "I lost track of time," she said, resting against him. "The Duomo looks like it's wearing a lace veil in this light. You're not going to be able to draw every cathedral in Italy." "I might try," she said, glancing up at him. "This place is peaceful. I wanted you to have room to breathe. I didn't know how much I needed it." He kissed her shoulder gently, then took her hand and led her back inside. Candles flickered along the mantel and a bottle of wine sat open on the table. By the fire, sketches were pinned to a corkboard she'd insisted on buying from a local art shop. Arielle's new project had taken shape in soft lines and bold silhouettes, branding for a boutique design house in Milan. A client she'd landed on her own, through a connection she'd made at the gallery weeks before. She curled into the sofa, legs folded beneath her, while Pax poured them each a glass. "You didn't go to your meeting today," she said, taking the glass. "I canceled it." She lifted a brow. "Why?" "Because I didn't want to miss this afternoon." "What was this afternoon?" He pulled something from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. She unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned it, then went wide. "This is a lease for a studio here," he said. "It's yours if you want it. I know New York will always be home, but Florence has you sketching more than I've ever seen. I thought, maybe we could split our time." She stared at him, stunned. "I didn't ask anyone for a favor," he said. "Didn't pull any strings. I found the space, but the rest is up to you." Arielle set the lease down and looked at him. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. You're building your life, and I want to stand beside you while you do." Her voice was quiet. "You really see me, don't you?" He nodded. "Every version. And I love all of them." The words settled between them, warm and steady. "I love you too," she said, the truth of it so clear, so full, it left no room for doubt. He leaned forward, forehead against hers. "Then come with me tomorrow." She pulled back slightly. "Where?" "To the hills. There's a chapel. Small. Almost forgotten. I want to ask you something there." Her breath caught. "You mean I'd rather show you?" The next morning, they drove out of the city in a vintage car Pax had borrowed from a friend who owed him a favor. The road wound through olive groves and half-sleeping vineyards, the sky soft with morning. The chapel sat on a rise, built of stone and ivy, its wooden doors weathered by time. Inside, it was quiet, only candles and dust motes and the scent of old wood. Arielle walked slowly to the front, where he waited. He held no ring box, no crowd, no fanfare. Just her hand and a promise. "I don't want a wedding filled with people we barely know," he said. "I don't want 100 guests or gold-embossed invitations." She smiled. "What do you want?" "You. Every morning, every night. I want to wake up beside you in New York and have dinner with you in this chapel's shadow. I want to build a life neither of us could have imagined because we built it together." She looked around the chapel. "Then let's start here." 2 days later, they stood beneath the arched stone of the chapel's doorway. A local pastor Pax had met through a neighbor officiated, speaking in accented English with a kindness that made the ceremony feel even more intimate. Arielle wore a simple cream dress she found in a tucked-away boutique. Her hair was pinned back with a gold clip Pax had given her that morning, not with diamonds, but etched with tiny vines and leaves just like the ones on the chapel walls. Pax wore no tie, just a white shirt, sleeves rolled, and a look in his eyes that said he still couldn't quite believe she was real. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. No promises of perfection, just of patience, partnership, and fierce, unwavering love. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Pax didn't wait. He pulled her close, kissed her deeply, and whispered, "Grazie, amore mio." They shared wine and bread on the chapel steps, laughing as the breeze tugged at her skirt. The photographer Pax had quietly hired took only candid shots. No poses, just them wrapped in each other. Later that evening, back in Florence, they danced on the rooftop of the villa under a string of lights Pax had hung himself. Music drifted from a small speaker, a song she'd once played for him in Brooklyn when everything between them was still fragile and new. You know, she said, resting her head on his chest, I used to dream about a life like this. And now I'm living it. He tilted her chin up gently. You created it. Together, they watched the stars blink awake over the terracotta rooftops. Years passed, not in a blur, but in layers, each one richer than the last. Arielle's design agency took root in both Florence and New York. She mentored young artists, hosted exhibitions, and filled sketchbooks with cities she and Pax explored hand in hand. Paris, Kyoto, Marrakesh, always returning to the villa. Pax stepped back from the constant grind, choosing instead to invest in causes he believed in: education, art programs, sustainability. He still built things, but now with purpose, not pressure. They spent slow Sundays in bed, fast mornings chasing flights, quiet nights cooking together with jazz playing low. He never stopped watching her with the same quiet wonder he had that day in the studio. She never stopped reaching for his hand, even in sleep. And every year, on the anniversary of the chapel wedding, they returned to the hills. Not just to remember, but to renew. To remind each other that love, when chosen fully and freely, doesn't fade. It deepens. And there's always wood.